Happy Friday. So I'm Todd, this is Toxic Garage Customs, and today I'm back into the International. Last where I finished off, I was working on the brake booster and the master cylinder and the steering column. Today I'm going to try and get that more installed, more finished. See how far I get, right along with the journey. So where I was up to last, it was actually last night, was I put this in, I corrected some errors, and I've lowered the booster and the master cylinder, and I got the column in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to, I've already marked out with some chalk just on the firewall here where the booster sits, and what I intend to do is take the booster out. I'm going to work out what size panel I want to put in there, and I'm going to cut out a piece of the firewall and put in a fabricated new piece of firewall to be able to clean up the holes that I've put there, and also to sink the booster into the firewall. While I'm doing that, I'm also going to reinforce it with some other steel, so you'll see that. And once I've done that, then I can move along. I can start bracing the column, the booster, and all that sort of good gear. It takes a little while, so we'll see how long and how far I get today. I've taken the booster and the master cylinder out, and I've just got a can of brake cleaner there sticking through the hole just to look like a steering column. And you may have seen I roughly marked it out as well. I've got the template back in here again, so that can of brake cleaner is to remind me to put a steering column in when I make this piece of steel. So I'm just going to mark out around it, and then what I intend to do is fabricate a piece of steel. Now I may come up higher just to fix my errors. I'm not going to try and fix the whole firewall in one hit. I'll do individual holes at a later date, but I just want to get the column and the booster mounted at this point in time, so that's my focus. Just marked out the area, and I've decided that I'm going to replace up to here somewhere and across to here, and probably right out to the corner, and then down around the curve down to below where my cut line is, so down here somewhere. So I'm using the CAD technique, and this is a cliche, it's been said 1,000 times, that cardboard assisted design. So I've just got an old folder from work. You might have things like this lying around, but yeah, this is just a manila folder. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make a template out of this, popping it down here, and make it out of cardboard, then make it out of metal. I've already put a mark on it to cut it down, so I'm just going to reduce the size a little bit so it's more manageable, and then I'll come back to you. Here's a useful tip: if you ever find a magnet, keep it, no matter what it is, because they're really good for holding things in place on metal. So I've just got this selection of different magnets here. So I've cut this piece of cardboard down, decided I'm just going to move it up to my original pencil line up here from previously. So I'm going to sit it there, and then I'll start templating it from there. Now, just taking my time putting the cardboard in place, I can see that it would make sense to make one sheet that goes from the top of where my booster's going right the way down around the corner and where the pedals used to be as well. I'm not going to be using those holes, so the left one was for the clutch, the right one was for the brake. My brake, as you've seen, is going to hang from the top, not coming up through the floor, and my accelerator I can put wherever I want. So I'm going to make up a piece big enough to do that whole area. I'm just going to fold it, or bend it I should say, through this line here, and I'll probably end up removing, not probably, I will end up removing that panel and getting rid of it completely. I'll do that before I start cutting the steel. And yeah, I think it's just logical that I make one piece, put it right the way through there, and make a cleaner area, because I'll have to repair those holes down the bottom at some point in time, so I might as well do it now out of one sheet rather than do additional welding in difficult spots. So I'll get onto that. Well, you've got to take wins when you can. Haven't had to use a grinder yet. There we have a hole. So this is what I'm talking about. I think I'm going to replace that in one piece. Now I'm wondering, do I just make up a plate that goes over that and covers the hole and make up a plate there? I could still have that bolt in or screw in, reduce the welding. I'll make a decision about that. Does sound like the easier option. A bit of toing and froing in my thought process here, but I've actually decided that I'm going to make one piece that covers the holes up the top there, the round holes, and then down to the line that I've marked on the cardboard here. And the reason being is that this panel at the bottom here, the whole thing right the way across the floor, actually removes. So it's got, put some more light on the subject. It's got bolts that come out. Where are they? So bolts that come out around the place, and the whole panel comes off. Now I may not ever need to remove that, but I figure that if I don't go welding other pieces to that, then I will be able to remove it if I want to. So I'm going to make one piece that comes down and covers my holes and just fixes the hole in the firewall, and I'll have to cut out a notch out of the bottom right hand corner for the column after I do that, but I know where that'll go now. Well, I got a better idea. And then down the bottom here, just this part over here, I'll make a separate piece just to patch that in, and then I'll recut it to the shape that I need for the column. And I will just make a panel for this out of the piece that came off. It's the right shape, size, it's just got some holes in it, and I'll make it removable as well. I'll put seam sealer or some sort of sealer all around this when I put it together. Everything's going to be painted and so on, so it might just be handy to have access points at some point in time. You never know. Why get rid of it if it's there, and if I never use it, then that's fine. So that's where I'm going. I just wanted to quickly put in here, I'm new to this YouTube stuff, and I believe that it's a pretty good thing to have a range of merch. So I've started and got to build it from here. So if you want any of it, let me know. So this is, I've got this jumper to start off with. I can make them custom with your name. I will have other designs as well. I'm going to make a sticker range as well. If this is something you think you'll like, then search for it in my store. You won't find it, but search for it anyway. So I've just cut it out pretty close to what it's going to end up. I've just notched it around here. I don't need to cut out any of that part there. So I'll take it down there. That'll just give a flat surface for the booster to mount onto. It'll mostly be behind the booster, and I solve a couple of little issues along the way. I could take it out further to the corner here if I wanted, but I think with those I'll either leave them there or cut them off and just fill them later rather than go bigger and better. So that's what my sheet of tin will look like. So got to take this to a piece of steel, a piece of sheet metal, and I'll cut it out. While it may not appear it, this is actually new steel. When I say it's new, it's about 6 months old. It's just got surface rust on it from sitting around. It's not into the surface, anything more than that. It's a little bit better on this side. That does happen. So I'm going to, using my magnets or tape or something, just got to find an appropriate place on this panel. I'll put that there, then I'll cut it out, and then I'll shape it up once I've got it cut out. Sorry about the flashing on the camera from the Blu-ray lights as well. I've cut some pretty unusual shapes out of this piece of metal, so there's not really a flat edge on it. Well, there is, but I don't want to go attacking the flat edges just at the moment. So I've put my shape there. I'm cutting out as best I can, creating as little waste as I can. By orientating my piece of cardboard, I can minimize waste, which is always good. So I'm going to cut this out. Having said that, with minimizing waste, along the bottom I am actually going to cut this out. I might actually cut the, I'll cut out a big square and then I'll trim it up from there, mainly so that what I leave behind on the sheet is not such an ugly mess, so that next time I can work with something with a flat edge. that metal cleaned up, came up pretty well. The important thing is that the surface rust is gone, gives me something clean to weld to when that time comes. And also I've got surface preparation there. Once I get it in there, I may throw some red primer on it or something, or some sort of primer just to stop it rusting up in the meantime. So what I've got, this is my template. This is the top. That circle there is where the booster is going to go, and this part here will fold underneath the firewall. It'll actually only be cut about this long, but I've cut it a little bit longer in the first place, the same with my metal, so that I can trim it up a bit. Because this fold was already in the cardboard, rather than fight with it, I use that to create that bend in it. So one piece of advice I've got, when you're making your templates, when you're making your steel, try and keep it as straight on the edges as possible, if you can, and as square as you can. So by square I mean being able to sit a square on it, and so that the corners are at 90-degree angle. The reason being is that when you want to set other things out, it's easy to be able to put your square on there and transfer it through it. So this point here, on this little notch, is where it's going to fold. So if I come across with my square, then I can transfer that point across, and I can draw a line down there, and I know that it will be square to this corner. So when I'm putting it all in place, everything, there's a reference point, a straight line, a 90-degree angle to reference to. It's not always what you have to do, and sometimes you can't do it. But if you can, I just find it makes life easier. And that's what I mean. So this line just here that I've just drawn, that's where the sheet metal is going to be folded, and it's going to be folded that way. So I've got a little sheet metal folder here that I'm going to use. I don't actually know the angle, so I'm going to pause the camera, go and have a look at the angle so I can get a bit of a visual. So this is the point. So down here is where I need to change the angle. Now I was just going to do a visual, but there's actually this tool here. It's called a sliding bevel, and what it does, you can set it to whatever angle you want and then transfer it to another point. So it might be a bit hard for me to do this on camera, but we'll see. So I'm going to put this very hard to see, but I've held this in place and then I've tightened the wing nut up, and what I've done, I've copied that angle. So the angle that I need to fold my sheet metal to is now recorded on my sliding bevel. So I can now transfer this angle over to my sheet metal. So because of the way that I need to fold this, as in I need to fold that lip back, then what I actually need to do, to use my sheet metal folder here, my little brake, is actually need to transfer the mark to the back. So again, using the same technique with the builder's square, I just transferred this point around from the other side and just hold my square in place, and working from my corner here. Then I've just transferred that point onto the other side of the metal, and I can do that because I've got a square and I have a straight line to work to. So what I've got is the same line transferred onto the back of the metal using the same reference points, this point and that straight edge. So I need this to fold that way. So what that means is that I need to put it in my brake upside down, like such. Again, the straight edge I can put into the lip of my brake there. Now, if you don't have a brake like this, and quite frankly, a lot of you won't, then you can actually just bend this. You can get two pieces of steel, clamp them together, and just bend them in a vise. I've done that many, many times. I happened to see this particular little tool for sale, and it was cheap, and I figured, why not? it looks like a toy. It saves me a lot of time. So see if I can do this with one handle. I shouldn't be able to because so I'm just bending that. Now I've got my angle here. I'll probably need to take the steel out to do it, but what I can eyeball at the moment is that I think I need to bend it a bit more. Now, it's better to bend too little than too much. So I'm going to pause this for a second. I'll take the metal out and then I can put my sliding bevel against it and see how I've gone. So looking at this, I can see I've bent it too far. So I only wanted to go as far as the angle that's on the bevel here. So I've gone a little bit too far. That's no biggie. I am going to put it onto a flat surface and push it down and try and straighten it back out again. Ideally, don't bend it too far. That flat surface is my floor, and the thing that I'm going to bend it with is my foot. Okay, so off camera I did it a couple of times just to get it right, but what we have here is I've now transferred that angle through to there, and hopefully it's going to fit the firewall. So I've got the piece of metal, initial inspection looks like it's good. I think once I've got two hands on this I'll be able to have a look at it more accurately. I'm happy with it, so I'll trim it down to size so that it's exactly as I want it, but I got the shape and I got the slightly too large size to work with. I just sat it there and it seems to look quite good. So there's just a few little things in the way that I want to remove so I can get it to sit as flat as I can before I mark out the booster location and start actually cutting it to fit it in place. Things like this lip around here, and maybe these studs, they're no longer needed. They held on the plate that was around the column before. This one down here I'll probably leave and work around because that one actually holds on the bottom of the floor, or the top of that floor panel that I was talking about that I'm going to retain. So I'm going to trim off what I can to get the panel to sit as flush as I can. Then I'll mark it out. I'll mark out my booster locations again, and I think I'll cut those holes out while I've got it off. No, I'll see. I may do it afterwards. But I'll start trimming that, neatening it up.